So Ian, thank you for joining us today. I realise it's been a bit of a schlep up from London and from the day job, but the community here, we're really going to be looking forward to hearing from you and asking you some questions, I hope. To the community here, this is your opportunity to ask Ian some questions. Ian has had an incredibly varied career, from academia over into being the chief executive of multiple organisations, working as an executive and non-executive. His experience over data and statistics across these organisations is probably unprecedented in the vast majority of people. So if you want to ask questions, this is your time, and Scott and I are prepared to ask them, okay? So please, make sure your app's working, like the questions that come through, and let's make this as an engaging session as we possibly can. Ian, where should we start?
Well, you're asking the questions.
So one of the first questions that we thought we would ask, because it's been a miserable summer, is did you manage to escape the rain? Did you get a holiday in the sunshine?
Well, we had 2 holidays, but sadly not in the sunshine. We walked from Settle to Carlisle.
Oh.
I would recommend that to absolutely anyone. Not right along the railway, but around the railway. Unbelievable viaducts, unbelievable rivers. Fantastic, but it rained most of the time. But I've got to tell you that the train journey back to Settle was unbelievable. And then we're, over time, walking the great rivers of Devon.
Oh, wow.
And so over the last bank holiday, 3 days, we walked the River Dart. I have to say the only problem was I lost my phone because it rained so much that it just sank. But is there anything better than walking into the middle of Dartmoor and then down to Dartmouth? Oh my God, what a great way to spend 3 days. So any kind of colour in my face is rain beaten.
You're certainly looking very tanned and very healthy, so good that the English weather is doing it for you. Scott wanted me to ask about your sporting career. So we've noticed that not only have you worked in academia and as a non-exec, but as a football referee and an umpire for cricket as well.
Yeah, no. Well, look, I've been around sport at a good level all my life, both playing and as a parent. And I kind of fell into football refereeing, which I enjoy enormously. And I kind of do it for 3 reasons, Johanna. Firstly, I enjoy it. And it is an unbelievable privilege at my age to be part of a decent level of sport, and doing that. Secondly, I recognise that in order to do it, you've got to be halfway fit. And sometimes when work is hard, the motivation to get to the gym needs a little bit of help. And the fact that you've got to run around at 100 miles an hour without getting too much abuse on a Saturday is helpful. And thirdly, without trying to be pretentious, at the end of the day, there aren't enough referees, and with substitutes, 30 people don't get a game unless there's a referee. So, I absolutely love it, and it's been incredible. I used to, when I was Vice Chancellor at University of Aberdeen, I found refereeing a fabulous way to train for chairing Senate.
And just to make the rest of us feel better, is there anything you can't do? Is there anything that you're not good at?
DIY, I've got to tell you. Totally useless.
Brilliant. So let's move on and let's have a conversation about the Government Statistical Service, which is our profession that sits across government and holds all of the civil servants, our analysts, together in one community. And Ian's our leader. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your experience with the GSS over the past 3 years.
Well, I think the Government Statistical Service, as you say, is statisticians right across not only government departments, but also into what we call the arm's length bodies, things like the Environment Agency and Ofsted and things like that. And at a moment in time where evidence is seen as ever more important, and at a moment in time when there really is a desire and a demand to raise the profile of statistics and data right across government. Today, Johanna, is the launch of something called One Big Thing. One Big Thing is Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary's big idea that every member of the civil service, every member of the civil service, whether you work in a job centre or whatever, will this autumn spend one day learning and upskilling in data.
Wow.
And that includes Simon himself, who's coming to Newport for a day's upskilling. And so really, there is an unprecedented, in my view, awareness and wish to really improve evidence. And the one thing that has been a real joy is working with Tamara Finkelstein. Tamara is the Permanent Secretary of DEFRA, and she heads the policy profession in government, and she is absolutely passionate that good policy needs good analysis, and that analysis has to, that policy has to be created by multidisciplinary teams from day zero. And she and I next week are doing a session which is around about how you make policy with statisticians and policy people working together, developing the questions, developing the analysis. And I think the Government Statistical Service is really important. It's, if you like, horizontal across government. And what I really have been trying to do is make sure that we're not, if you like, sat in our own departments with, if you like, in a darkened room creating policy, but actually that we are working together, we are sharing best practice, we are a community of statisticians, and that we can provide the very best evidence for our political leaders to be able to make the decisions that they have to make.
Yeah, so congratulations on that, because that's an incredible feat. And I know that you've championed increasing data literacy across the community and into government for the past few years. And it's been very well received. I certainly remember when I came into government about 12 years ago that the conversation was statisticians need to be at the table. And certainly we are at the table now.
I think that's right, and it has to be more than statisticians. You can't be the small person stood on the edge of a playing field with their hand up saying, can I play too? You have to demonstrate that you add value and you bring value. And I do think statisticians in government have really demonstrated that. And most importantly, by, if you like, working together and really working to answer questions. If we go back to the beginning of the pandemic, there was a huge demand for data, and data was flying from everywhere. And I remember talking to one senior government advisor and saying, look, this is a data deluge.
Yeah.
We have to turn this into insight, and that means we need to ask questions and answer them. And I think statisticians across government have been brilliant in moving the discourse to one of, let's identify the question, can we answer it with the data we have, and if we don't, what data do we need?
Yes, and that takes us neatly on to not just the communication of the work that we do, but also the narration that goes around the insights that we develop, particularly in areas like economic statistics and COVID, which are incredibly complex with the modelling capabilities that come through. So have you seen any changes, any differences in narration of that and how we support and influence that policy-making decision, and in fact decisions that need to be made in rapid time?
Yeah, I mean, I think really, the first thing I'd say is that we now have at our fingertips a massive array of data, some from very new data sources, and actually understanding the pros and cons of a particular data source, and then being able to bring them to the agenda in a really agile way has been something that we have really worked on. The other thing that I think government statisticians have really worked on quite successfully is being prepared to say, look, this is hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so there isn't a simple answer I can tell you in 2 minutes, but if you're prepared to give me an hour, we'll talk it through and we'll explain the pros and the cons. And that, I think, is a really, really important place to be. And I think, really, really incredibly important that we as statisticians concentrate on our discourse. I remember decades ago coming out, I was walking down a corridor in a university department, and someone was just coming out of a seminar. And I said to Jeff, was something like he said, oh, much poring over beta coefficients. And, you know, I think it's really important that while that's fine if you do have, if it's a set of methodologies, if you've got to explain to a policymaker, to a minister, to another permanent secretary exactly what's going on, you need to explain carefully and in a way that explains not only the pluses, but what the uncertainty is and what you don't know.
And what you don't know, yeah. And the same, of course, is true with our academic community. So the same conversation and the same narration of our science as we take that forwards as well. And I know I've worked a lot with David Spiegelhalter over the years in the development of the narration as a young academic and with young academics to be able to comprehend and communicate science from that perspective as well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, one of the things I think that statisticians have got much better at is depicting uncertainty. You know, I saw some unbelievably beautiful graphs last week about where we had got to with GDP, both through the pandemic and then the likely or unlikely future. And actually communicating uncertainty is so important, because I think one of the worst things is when people say, well, what's the answer?
Yeah.
You know, you have to be able to say what uncertainty means and what that variance means.
Yeah. And it always helps when you're working with people who are prepared to make decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Got any questions? You got anything coming in?
Well, I'm going to say this is like Dictionary Corner and Countdown, isn't it? Coming to me. So I can say at the moment we have got the grand total of 0 questions. So either the app isn't working and isn't filtering to me, or nobody's asking questions. So can I encourage you to get on the app and ask questions? Otherwise, I might pick on people to do it. But we're going to break the rules. I can see Jane has got her hand up. So Jane, I think the microphones at the end of the aisle might be live. If they're not, you'll just have to shout. But please keep using the app.
Sorry, I deliberately put a question in to try to see if the system was working. And Ian, you're allowed to respond in suitable kind to the question. What are the risks posed by aerated concrete?
Are you an expert in aerated?
I've got to be absolutely honest. I am not an expert at the moment on aerated concrete, although I know the statisticians in DFE are looking very, very carefully at the issue, and we will be prepared to really look at what the, well, basically what the professionals are telling us, and certainly there are some very, very good reviews of aerated concrete by professors of engineering who talk about the uncertainty and the issues there, and I know that it is the highest priority in the Department for Education at the moment.
Okay, so I'm guessing that means, Jane, you put a question in the app. So am I right in saying the app's full of questions, it's just me that can't see them, is that? Okay, so admin have to approve it. Okay, well we're learning, so that's okay. We'll ad-lib while that happens. So I can see a couple more questions, then we'll carry on with the conversation. So there's a gentleman right at the front. Do you want to go to the microphone at the end of the aisle?
I'm Gilbert McKenzie. I just wanted to ask Sir Ian if evolution has had any hampering effect in the attempt to bring things together at a national level. I noticed in some areas that there is some diversity of statistical harmonization.
Well, across the UK.
So just to double check, it was devolution, not evolution. I misheard. I was thinking, gosh, that's a in-depth
I heard
question.
evolution.
Okay, so it's devolution is what we're...
Yes,
yeah.
Well, the evolution of devolution.
Evolution, yeah, okay,
Fantastic.
We'll go with that. That sounds good.
Brilliant. A really, really good question. And of course, statistics is devolved. And therefore, there are many areas where it is not possible to make statistical comparisons. And I have to say that in some areas, for example, education, the systems are very different, and therefore many comparisons are not valid. Having said that, for me, the critical thing is being able to design UK-wide in an early way. We were able to do that during the pandemic with the COVID infection survey. We've done it with our opinions and lifestyle surveys, and that enables us to make UK-wide comparisons. And we've been putting a lot of work lately, and Scott, you've been incredibly helpful at Public Health Scotland, into assessing what questions we can make comparisons across all 4 administrations of the UK. And when we can make those comparisons, then, of course, it is for the administrations to decide whether they wish to publish them. So simple answer is that where we have agreement across the 4 administrations, we can publish statistics which are as comparable as we can make them, but that is not always the case. In some countries, and just as an example, I mean, in Scotland, some fabulous advances have been made to identify deaths due to drug-related offences in a very early way. That is not possible to do in England, and we, Chris Whitty and myself, are in correspondence with the coronial leaders to try to make some progress in that area. I cannot report on where we are with that yet.
Okay, so Gilbert will give you the right of reply very briefly, and then we'll go back to Johanna, and then the app is now working. I'm now getting lots of questions, and some quite random ones as well, which I look forward to putting to Serene shortly. So Gilbert, very quickly.
Yes, very quickly. The area I was thinking about mainly was cancer registration and cancer survival data, especially post-COVID, where my experience of using the cancer registries is that the data are available for different periods, and very often they are adjusted, whereas we would like to know, I think, what actually is happening, that we need the crude unadjusted data as well as adjustment under various hypotheses.
I completely agree with you, and we've been talking across the 4 administrations about that particular issue, because you can't make the comparisons at the moment. It's as simple as that. We do not have the data, and if you say, well, why don't you just do something about it? As I say, I am the UK's national statistician, but I do not have power to say what goes on in Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, and therefore we act by agreement. And on that particular area, we haven't yet been able to collect data which are entirely comparable.
Okay, so we're going to stick with the questions because there's some amazing questions coming through. I'm going to ignore the ones that are taught because there was a brilliant one that came up just to lighten the room a wee bit. So Sir Ian, you're a statistician, you're an umpire. Can you explain Duckworth-Lewis to the group?
I could explain Duckworth-Lewis-Stern. It's basically you take, look, let's be absolutely honest, what you do is you take the results from every game that you can possibly get, and there's tens of thousands, you put them all together, you do an analysis, and you work out what might happen if the rain hadn't come. And you press it into your computer, and you come to a number, and the captains say, that can't be right. And you say, I'm terribly sorry, it is. And then we go and play cricket. Okay. But I had many conversations, I was privileged to have a number of conversations with Frank Duckworth, which I really, really super enjoyed. And I just think it's a wonderful piece of applied statistics.
Yeah, I remember at one previous conference, I think we had the dinner at our cricket ground, and so he was there to talk about it all, which was great. Okay, I'll move on to a more sensible question. So the one that's got the most likes. There are challenges in saying I don't know when others claim certainty. So any tips on how to avoid being seen as indecisive or clueless? So I guess this is if you're in the Government Statistical Service and you think there's uncertainty, but others are telling you, are publicly saying there's great certainty in a particular thing.
No,
How do you handle that?
I think it's a really, really, really good question from Paul. And my view is that if you just say, don't know, then that's not very helpful. But if you say, don't know because, and then explain what the issue is, then I don't think you're seen as indecisive or clueless. You are explaining very clearly what is going on. And I return to something I said in the conversation with Johanna. You know, the first thing to do, it seems to me, is to find out exactly what the question is. You know, and it may be that someone say, oh, I know, I'm giving you the answer to something that's not particularly useful. So find out exactly what the question is, then explain why you don't know what the answer is right away, and then explain why you don't know. The other thing that people expect you to know off the top of your head is what's the sample size I need to estimate this. And I have a very strong personal view, and I've used it 100 times, I never respond to that. Because it's just silly, you know? What's the sample? I don't know. You know, it's actually quite a hard calculation. And I'll explain to you why it's a hard calculation, then I'll go away, I'll do that calculation, then I'll come back, and then we can have a conversation on what the design of this should be. But I've never been embarrassed about saying the statistics is hard. I mean, there are people in this room who probably think it's pretty easy. I've been very privileged to do statistics. I love being a statistician, but I've always found it hard. You know, end of problem. So I don't mind telling people this is hard. And if someone wants a quick answer, like I say it very often, you want a quick answer? I'll give you a quick answer, but it'll be wrong. You know, and so you just have to be prepared to really just explain what the issue is.
Okay, we'll take one more, then I'll
There's
keep
loads
going,
on
'cause
here.
there's loads here. Yeah. So there's a couple on artificial intelligence. So how has the importance of general statistical literacy within the population changed in light of AI? And I saw there was a supplementary, let me just find it, about ChatGPT and whether or not you think that poses any risks. So thoughts on AI?
Sorry, I thought you were saying there's another one on ChatGPT, which
Oh,
there
there
is,
was,
if
that
you
was-
can't
sorry,
go
that
up a
was-
bit.
Yeah, so the risks.
So I was going to get
It's
both.
not
So
quite.
look, I mean-
It's not quite as slick as Countdown. So there was.
Okay, look, AI is incredibly important, as is the link between data science and statistics. Do I think that AI will take over from statistics? Not in a million years. Do I think that the principles that I learned in the 1970s as a young statistician still hold with AI? 100%. Do you need to worry massively about bias with AI? 100%. Do you need to worry massively about ethics? 100%. And do you need to worry massively about transparency in understanding what is going on? Completely. Take all those points, then AI's got, it's just so much opportunity, enormous opportunity to be able to do things that I could only have dreamt about even a few years ago. And we're able at ONS to be able to use things called reproducible analytic pipelines to be able to really reduce the probability of error and speed up right across government, right across the Government Statistical Service. There are examples of using reproducible analytic pipelines to get better data faster with less error. So it's got to be good news. I think that large language models have an enormous potential in all kinds of ways, not least in terms of statistical literacy. We're just putting a front end onto our website called StatChat, which is a large language model to enable us to get much better searches of our data. And I think it's incredibly important. I think the opportunities to communicate with the public are incredibly important. But it comes back to that first question, doesn't it? You know, is there a right answer? Well, the right answer includes some uncertainty, and we need to be able to explain things properly. But the right answer is only the right answer if you, I would argue, if you understand something about the problem that you are looking at, you understand the question, you understand where the data come from, you understand the sample, and you understand your estimation process, then AI can help massively. But I do fear sometimes that we have the potential to bring bias into analysis that we don't quite know about if we're not careful. So I think there's a huge role for us as statisticians, not to be kind of Luddites saying, but you don't understand. We need to embrace, but we need to embrace with real confidence about what the challenges are and how we overcome them.
There's a great question on here that talks about, you know, obviously very skilled statistician, but what else do you think are the skills that have helped you be successful in your career?
Well, my PhD supervisor, Richard Cormack, was a fabulous person who taught me to write. You know, I mean, I must admit, you know, I did A-levels by choosing those subjects when I didn't have to write any essays, and managed to get through university fairly successfully. Richard, I still have somewhere at the bottom of a box Richard's comments on the first draft of the first chapter, and it has, you know, big red written right across it. One word. I'd written a whole page and he just wrote bathos. I didn't even know what bathos meant. And it's brilliant. And I really learnt to write. And I think that's really helpful, because I think if there's one... And then the other thing was just, you know, lecturing in a university and teach, you know, 4 or 5 lectures a day and things was a real privilege, and you learn how to communicate hard things really well. And I think those are the things that I would say is, you know, communication, writing. Jim, I am so ridiculously excited about statistics every day, and I hope that just comes across sometimes.
What do you see as the greatest opportunities that we've got coming up with regard to technology changes and data use?
Well, I mean, somebody asked me that a little while ago. I said data linkage. I do think that data linkage, which we've been able to do for a while, well, for 20 odd years, I think, seriously, but I do think data linkage enables us to be able to bring data sets from all kinds of places together in a relatively easy way to answer questions which are really relevant. And I think that that's important, because so many of the big questions that we face as a nation, as a society, as a human kind, are multidisciplinary, need data from different sources, and need them in, I would say, as much real time as possible. I mean, you know, if you go back to when we started, I mean, I remember working with Kath Kiernan in the 1980s using the National Survey of Health and Development, the cohort survey, you know, unbelievably beautiful data. But at the same time, what we can now do to build cohorts very quickly and very big, to build inclusive data into our cohorts, and then to be able to link data and answer unbelievably important questions, seems to me to be where technology can help us. None of those things, though, I return to the point, none of those things happen just by magic, press a button. You've got to understand the question, you've got to understand the model. You link data, you've got 2 different error structures. Yeah. So you have to worry about what linking those data does to the overall error structure. Yeah. You know, there are whole sets of questions that mean that, for me, we as statisticians are going to be in business forever.
I think that's absolutely true. Should we take another one from the...
Yeah, so I'm just scrolling through a lot of the questions. So one that's intrigued me is I'm wondering what the person thinks you're going to answer to this one. Name a daily habit which has helped your career.
Oh.
Sorry?
Name a daily habit that has helped your career.
Training.
Training, okay.
You train every day?
I train every day. Well, I say I train every day. I probably train 7 days a week most of the week, but if I don't get too stressed about it. But, you know, you go for a run, or you go for a bike, or you go to the gym. I've never been once in my whole life without feeling better afterwards. Yeah. You know?
And the clarity in your mind.
Oh, 100%.
Changes.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you think of some pretty good ideas. A former colleague of mine, I spoke about this recently, former colleague of mine, Tim Holt, who was a national statistician in the 90s and a former president of the Society, I was privileged to work with him at the University of Southampton, and we used to go running most days, you know, and it just turned into a seminar. You know, I was recalling just before his funeral that I remember just running up this hill. He said, "Ian, have you ever thought about measurement error in panel data?" And I just remember thinking to myself, no, but I'm about to.
Yeah.
You know, and about an hour and a half later, you know, we kind of came back and when we went and did some work together, it was great.
The fact that you were running up a hill having a conversation is a new one on me.
There's a question about the Code of Practice for Statistics, which is being reviewed, which I thought was quite important. Just to ask you, Sirian, what key changes do you think need to be made to the Code of Practice for Statistics?
I frankly don't think there need to be too many changes. I mean, what it says, if you read it, I think stands up very carefully to the course of time. However, I do think, you know, some of the things we've been talking about, data linkage, the use of AI, need to be thought through and put in. I think those are the, so I would, you know, I think it stands up very well to the course of time, but there are new things that we can do, new things that we are doing that we need to be building into it. And I know that the Office for Statistical Regulation are thinking about them quite hard.
Okay, and there's a couple of questions about advice you would give young statisticians just starting out. So kind of what would be your best bit of advice for young statisticians? There's one question in particular which kind of comments that statisticians are often seen as boffins, and that limits their progress up to executive levels. So kind of how would you respond to that one?
Well, I've never had a... no, look, we are boffins. Come on, I'm proud of it, you know? And that's absolutely great. But equally, you've got to be able to communicate. And I think that the word, as you move up into kind of executive type positions, is that communication, negotiation, diplomacy, all things you learn as a statistician, particularly if you work in teams, are basically what you need. Plus, a very clear focus on what good looks like and how you are going to get there, and having a very clear analytic mind. My advice to young statisticians is always just do what you enjoy. You know, people say, which areas should I say? Well, whatever you're interested in. I have never done anything because I thought I ought to. I just did things that excited me, and just move forward. And that would be my advice to young statisticians: have a lot of fun.
And certainly the opportunity is greater than ever before for progression and movement
what
across
you can
and
do,
within the sector.
what you can do.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
So can we maybe take a question about the pandemic? Obviously, that's one that's very close to my heart. So there's a question about the important lessons for statisticians from the pandemic. So maybe just reflecting on, I guess, the role of statisticians during the pandemic and then what have we learned.
Yeah, look, I think as statisticians in the pandemic, I think, firstly, I'll speak about government statisticians. I thought people stood up to the mark very, very quickly. We did a lot of things. Public Health Scotland did a lot of things at great pace and also with great accuracy. We also demonstrated the power of linking health data to other sources. So, for example, the work that ONS did on ethnic differentials in mortality, where we were able to link census data with mortality data, with GP data, with valuation office agency data to understand housing, was absolutely brilliant. We could only do that using something called COPI notices, which were special allowances for the pandemic, which enabled health data to be used. That's stopped now. So suddenly all those great advances, all those things we could do, we could do wonderful things. Sadly, on COVID, we couldn't then do the same things on cardiovascular disease. Yeah. And I do think, I recognise the reasons why the Digital Economy Act did not include health data, because they wished to make some progress, and that was, I think, pragmatically the right thing to do at that time. But I do think that the pandemic has given us a real message for why being able to use health data ethically, with privacy, and for the public interest is the right thing to do. Second thing, I would say is that I think as statisticians, we really thought more broadly than just the health area. And the use of private sector data to understand what was going on in the economy and therefore to be able to do things at pace was incredibly important. So, for example, the labour force, I love the labour force survey, but it tells you what was going on some months ago. So being able to supplement the labour force survey with what we call RTI data, which is weekly data from HMRC on the number of people on payrolls, together with Azuna data or breaking glass data on vacancies, being able to bring those together was incredibly important. Now, I mean, it's worth remembering that those latter two data sources are not complete. Payrolls doesn't include the self-employed, but they give you very quick, helpful indications of what are going on. And so you need to be able to take that whole narrative approach. And then final thing I would just say, and I could talk for a long time about this, Scott, as you know, but I would just like to point out about communication. In the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, you may recall there were many press conferences. I was privileged to be at the podium myself. And in the first few weeks, I would have to say some of the slides were not great. And we, ONS, embedded a team from ONS inside the Government Communication Service to do the slides. And I think in the second half of the pandemic, certainly after the first few months, the quality of the slides improved. And RSS nominated 2 people who joined the Public Data Advisory Group, as it became known, to advise on the presentation of data, one of those being Mike Campbell, and I think that was incredibly helpful as well. So I think there's a lot of things we learned. I just hope, I really, really super hope, that we don't forget them and just, say, oh, well, we've done that now, because we can move forward and we can do, I think, really exciting new things.
And so it feels in some way that actually with the experiences that we've had in the pandemic and the technology development that's come around us with regard to platforming or federating data and the use of data, that actually it's now our own constraints that hold us back from doing some of this work. How do you go about, in the most seamless way, unpicking the facets of legislation or government departments or even, for our academic community, accessing some of the data that they want to be able to do?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we're just building a multi-cloud platform which will enable data to be linked. Of course, we need to have the permissions to use those data, and that's why I made the point about health data. But many other data sources we are able to bring together in a way that, so long as the work is in the public interest, so long as the statistician applying demonstrably has the ability to use the data, and so long as there is ethical background, then we can get people onto data really pretty quickly. Yeah. I'm talking about weeks. And I think that's entirely reasonable. And, it is built on, in my opinion, the philosophy of the data archive, which has been going, the ESRC data archive been going now for over 60 years. And I do think we need to just continue to really make those data available. And I think it's incredibly important as well that we raise people's ambitions. And if you've got bright ideas, we need to support them and we need to make them happen.
Okay, so I think we've got time for just a couple of questions, but I'm conscious, and with digital inclusion, there's a few folk who've not been able to use the app, and a few
Well,
folk.
it's always a real problem, isn't it,
Did
when
have
you're
that.
doing this and you've already announced there's drinks straight afterwards.
Well, I know that, but there's so many questions coming through. It's quite incredible. So there's a couple of people who had their hands up before. Just want to check the gentleman at the front with the phone jacket. Do you want to ask your question? Just to give you the chance to.
All right, thanks very much. I'm Simon Day. This has been really fascinating. Thank you. Thinking just hypothetically as an example, we could call it COVID, but there's other concrete examples around. I'm always keen that decisions should be judged based on what you knew at the time. And there's lots of people that are very, very clever after the event. And do you worry that some decisions that might have been made in good faith, based on the best data that were available, are retrospectively considered to be wrong, and that then undermines the people working on it, the data, the use of statistics, and so on?
I think it's an incredibly important point. I mean, if you remember back to March 2020, when I first had a conversation with Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance about doing a COVID infection survey, we didn't know the extent to which there was asymptomatic illness. Now we know a huge amount. We know an enormous amount now that we simply didn't know. And I think it's incredibly important to remember that decisions are made in good faith at a particular time. I mean, I've said publicly a few times, that I recognise that in our country of around 60 million people, there are over 59,999,999 with the benefit of hindsight. Yeah. Sadly, I'm the other one, but I do think you're right. It is incredibly important that we are prepared to stand up and say, hold it. This is what we knew. Those were the decisions that were made. And people have to back people and say, that was a good decision, given the evidence that was there. We now know so much more. So many things, a lot of things that I've done in my life were based on decisions that were right at that time. And now they're perhaps not quite so right, or they're still right, but in a different context. And I think it's important that we are prepared to be able to back people and to really be clear about what the evidence was at a particular time.
Okay, great question. Now, conscious that's triggered a whole load of hands going up. What I'm going to suggest, because we're running out of time, is that we carry those questions onto the drinks afterwards. I think, Serene, you're going to hang around for a wee bit, are you? You're not going to run away.
I'll answer any question any time.
Okay.
We have a deal at ONS that if we don't get through the questions, people send them, and then I sit down on the train and write an answer.
There's loads and loads and loads. So maybe just one final question, if I may, just throw it in. What can the Royal Statistical Society do to support the GSS community, so the Government Statistical Service community? And what do you value about the RSS the most?
Well, look, I mean, I've been a fellow since, I was trying to remember, I can't remember if I've been a fellow since 1980 or 1981, one of the two. And I have absolutely valued what the RSS stands for and what it is for, obviously, the last more than 40 years. And I also recognise, if you'd asked me what my career highlight was, it was probably the first time I spoke to the teenagers here won't remember that the RSS used to meet in the London School of Hygiene in the Manson Theatre, and it was just one of the biggest buzzes of my life when I first gave a paper to the RSS in the Manson Theatre. I mean, just like, oh my God, I was so excited. And I think the RSS, just for all the kind of reasons that we've talked about, is ever more important. And you said, Scott, what can the RSS do to be helpful? Well, be critical. At the end of the day, I see the RSS as I said this to Sarah earlier, the major stakeholder that we have. And I would urge you to be critical friends. Now, sometimes in my life, I've met critical friends who forgot the word friend. But you know, let's have a conversation. If we're not doing things properly across the government system, let's have that conversation. If there are things we could do better, let's have that conversation. I saw Sheila is here throughout the pandemic, and I should say during the pandemic that the RSS really stood up to the mark and great stuff. But you know, throughout the pandemic and before and afterwards, I look forward to an email from Sheila. It is always constructive, thoughtful, sometimes about mortality statistics, and really super helpful. And that's exactly what I would urge the RSS to be. We're very keen to encourage more engagement. One of the things that Mike Hughes suggested recently was that we should publish at ONS our annual work plans so that people could engage properly. I'd like to see that happen. And so I think it is not for me to tell the RSS what to do. It is for the RSS to engage and to be critical friends and to advise and to help. Because at the end of the day, I would argue that a strong RSS helps a strong GSS, and a strong RSS and GSS is brilliant for all statistics.
Okay, I think that feels like a brilliant place to end the session. So can I ask you all to put your hands together for Serene and Johanna? That's always a sign of a good session when the questions just keep on coming. So we'll continue the questions over drinks. So the drinks reception is, I'm going to say downstairs, but I'm not entirely sure where it is downstairs, but hopefully somebody will guide us to the right place. And just to remind you that the first sessions tomorrow are at 9 o'clock, so we've got quite a lot of sessions starting at 9 o'clock. Just encourage as many of you as possible to turn up at 9 o'clock to support the speakers who are in those early slots. That would be great. And just to say a personal huge thank you to Sir Ian and Johanna for giving up their time and having such a great first session. So again, another round of applause for our speakers. Thank you.